Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of the Google MENA Digital Days. And my name is Sachin, a Google developer expert for the Google Assistant. And in today's session, we'll actually learn about the new Actions Builder for building conversational actions for the Google Assistant. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we get going, there's two important things that you need to take into account. For everyone who's joining us live today, make sure to actually leave us your feedback, which is very important for us to keep continuing to deliver great content over the course of these months. So everyone who's actually giving us the feedback would also get an attendance certificate for actually joining in live. At the same time, we do also have weekly challenges. So if you join the challenge, complete 6 quests, you get a gift box of goodies. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. At the same time, if you complete 12 quick quests, you'll get a Google Home Mini. So I'm so excited to have you all today live, and we'll get started with the session. So just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Sachin, a Google developer expert, especially for the Google Assistant. I'm also the Chief Technology Officer at Tupelo Life, which is a connected healthcare company based out of Dallas, Texas. I also head the Google Developer Group's Doha. And if you're interested in following me in social media channels, make sure you connect with me through Twitter. And I do write a lot of articles, tech articles and tutorials. Make sure to check out the website, as well as I do have my own YouTube channel as well. So whatever today's session that we're going to go through, sit back, relax, enjoy, try and understand the concepts involved in it. Let's keep it as interactive as possible. So I'll be glancing at the live comments as well. We do have a moderator as well who's actually doing a great job, where he'll be sharing slides and other things with you guys. So it's very important. Let's try and keep it as interactive as possible so that we have this more of a productive session. Speaking of my YouTube channel, everything that we're going to learn today, the entire videos and tutorials are all out there, so you guys can actually go back and refer that and learn how to do it step by step. So full hands-on, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So it's called Tech with Such. So if you go to youtube.com/techwithsuch, you get to see the channel. Make sure to subscribe to it, as well as hit the bell icon so that you can be notified for future videos. So the most important thing over here is, as part of GDG MENA, I'm sure that if you have joined for the first time, make sure to click this YouTube channel's subscribe button, as well as the bell icon, because we have videos on a day-to-day basis. We started sometime in March, and we have continuous videos of experts and Googlers coming onto the channel and delivering great content on a day-to-day basis. So I'm here today to actually announce a new tool. I'm not sure how many have followed the announcement of the Actions Builder, which is a new tool which was built by Google. And I'm excited to share that firsthand over here in GDG MENA as well. So before we actually get to know the new tool, for people who are actually joining us live for the first time and building conversational actions, let's actually step back and see how we've started and what was the old way and what's the new way of how to build conversational actions. Okay, so for people who are not familiar with Google Assistant, I would highly encourage you guys to try it out in your own Android phone or iPhones, or if you have smart speakers like these at home, you can actually try out the Google Assistant as well. So you pretty much say, hey, followed by Google, to actually initiate a conversation with the Google Assistant. And speaking of the Google Assistant, what is the Google Assistant? So think about Google Assistant as your own personal virtual assistant from Google to get things done for you in the most helpful manner. So that's what Google Assistant is all about, right? You can do things from controlling your smart lights, appliances at home to even asking daily queries or questions, or even taking reminders, notes. Everything is handled by the Google Assistant. So it's a great feature. It's one of the most advanced virtual assistant out there. I can clearly state that because I've tried multiple assistants as well. So you guys can actually try it out, and it's really it's a great experience. Now, speaking of the Google Assistant, which is, as I mentioned, it's your own virtual assistant from Google to get things done for you in the most helpful manner. What does it mean for us as developers? So I'm pretty much sure that a lot of you guys who are joining are coming from different backgrounds. Some might be developers, some might be looking to start up a business. So we have startups, entrepreneurs, different people from different background who's actually come onto this channel. And the importance of actually having to build your own conversational actions or applications for the Google Assistant. Why is it so important for us? So this slide pretty much sums it up, right? So the Google Assistant is readily accessible across 1 billion plus devices. Now, with that access, that amount of devices with the Google Assistant built in, you can imagine the amount of reach that you would get as developers, as entrepreneurs, businesses, startups. You have the ability to kind of bring out your brand and take it across to all of these devices just in the form of Google, with the help of Google Assistant. Now, speaking of the Google Assistant, I've given you numbers, 1 billion plus devices, which is pretty impressive. But also look at the kind of devices that the Google Assistant is built in. So we have your Android phones, you have your iPhones. Yes, Google Assistant is also available in iPhones, so do check it out. Download the Google Assistant, and you can actually check that out as well. So we have smart speakers, we have smart displays, then we have Chromebooks, TVs. The Google Assistant is even available in cars right now with Android Auto. So think about the whole reach and access that you guys would have as developers to go through this entire process. Just not only with the devices, we have a growing audience in terms of the language support as well. So we do have a lot of language support. This slide is actually not even showing the entire list. So do check out the documentations to actually find out the entire list as well. If you guys are actually asking if Arabic support is there, it's still not yet there in terms of developing, but Arabic support is, the Google Assistant is actually available in Arabic as well. So recently, last year, during December, Google announced that it's available across the entire region. So do check that out in Arabic as well. And let me know what you feel about the Google Assistant. So previously, when we looked at the Google Assistant, we'll come to where I'm going here in terms of how we build for the Google Assistant. There's three major components over here. One is the Google Assistant, which, as I mentioned earlier, is your own personal assistant from Google that gets things done that basically gets things done for you easily via multiple things. Not only voice, you can actually chat with it. So it's almost like, you have a chatbot from Google as well. Then you have devices with the Google Assistant built in. So these include your Android phones, iPhones, voice-activated speakers like Google Home. We have the smart display speakers as well. And then we have the actions on Google. So we know what a Google Assistant is, which is a virtual assistant. We know that the Google Assistant is built across all of these wide array of devices. But how do we actually build for the Google Assistant? Where do we go to actually learn to build for the Google Assistant? That's where Actions on Google come into. So Actions on Google is a developer platform that helps you define to fulfill actions that the users can invoke. So it's basically your Actions on Google is the developer platform which will help you extend the functionalities of the Google Assistant. So that's the platform where you actually go and create a project, build your own conversational actions, or if you're interested in smart home projects, that is the console or application that you go into. So, conversations. So, speaking of conversations, the whole idea about conversations and voice computing being the future, and why there is a lot of interest in this field, is it just goes back to how we are naturally inclined to conversations, right? As humans, the best way that we know how to communicate with each other is through having a normal voice conversation. We like to talk to each other, get the information, and then from that nuances, understand the context of what the conversation is, and we pretty much understand each other. Now, with the current technology landscape, we have mobile phones, we have apps. For each kind of app, you need to download an application, you need to go install it, go through different screens to basically get a certain task done. Now, with a conversation, it's a completely different ball game, because you just have to have a conversation and you can get your things done. So think about Uber, for example, right? So you want to order an Uber. The current way of doing it is you basically open up your app, set the location where you want to go, and done. Now, instead of that, if you just say that, hey, G, I need to help me get an Uber, then you're basically talking to the Uber application behind the scenes, and based on the location, again, you have to allow for that. But once they know the location, you have your Uber right at your doorstep. So just with having one single conversations. So that's how powerful conversational actions are. And the reason why I keep saying actions instead of applications is, from a conversational standpoint, we don't call it applications like mobile applications. We refer to them as actions. So I hope you guys actually understand that concept. Now, speaking of conversational actions, this is a typical typical flow of how the conversation happens. The user gives an input or talks to the Google Assistant. Google Assistant understands what it is, then talks to your, if you're talking to your action, it hands it over to your action or your voice application, and then passes the information and sends it back as a response back to the user. So the Google Assistant is the one who's actually handling a lot of things behind the scenes, like text-to-speech conversion or speech-to-text conversion. Either way, if everything is handled by the Google Assistant. And that's the response that goes back to the user. So I'm pretty sure, like, for a lot of you people who's joining us and who's been part of the previous sessions that I did, we did building conversational actions in a different way. So before, the old way of doing the conversational actions was using this, right? So this used to be the workflow. We used to say, hey, Google, talk to personal chef. Google Assistant passes the information. Then it goes to the cloud. So to be exact, we used to actually use Dialog Flow. So Dialog Flow is still there. Dialog Flow is actually built for chatbots. It's a great tool. It's still there. And you can actually build a lot of cool things with Dialog Flow. But before, we used to actually build conversational actions between two different platforms. One was Dialog Flow, and the other one was Actions on Google Console, right? So if you look at this example as such, when the user says talk to personal chef, the Google Assistant used to do all of the speech to text, NLP, all of that. And then from there, it used to go to Dialog Flow. So this is your Google Cloud project. And behind the scenes, it used to go to Dialog Flow, passes the information, and then sends it back to the Google Assistant. And the user then gives the next conversation. So this is what it used to happen. And for people who are wondering why we use Dialog Flow before, because just take an example of this specific conversation. Well, it's kind of cold outside, so I liked something to warm me up, like a hot soup, and I want it fast, right? So this was an action or voice application that was meant to give you a recipe based on the request that you give. But here, as you can clearly understand that cold, warm, hot, and fast is completely different meanings. It doesn't uh, relate to, it doesn't have any context to the food as such, but the cold, warm, and fast that he's talking about is cold about the weather, something to warm me up is basically what how he feels, and then want it fast, that he needs it fast. So to kind of pass a conversation or a sentence like this, I'm sure that with a lot of developers out there, try and think about a regular expression to basically understand just this simple conversation. I cannot do this because it's pretty complex. Even if I do something for this, imagine all the other conversational uh, options that we need to carry out. So with that, we talked about Dialog Flow. So Dialog Flow was actually the framework for developers to build or design conversational actions easily using this tool called Dialog Flow. So again, this was what we used to do. So this was the screen that I was talking about. So this was the old way of doing it, where Dialog Flow is the platform. And from Dialog Flow, it used to go back and forth between Dialog Flow and Actions on Google, which was fine. I mean, even with the old way, it was quite easy. But for me to actually go out there and actually explain to people while doing conferences and talks and sessions is the whole idea of I have to teach two different platforms, or even as developers, you have to get used to two different platforms, go back and forth sometimes, so all this frustration about going back and forth between two different two different platforms. And Dialog Flow was designed more to keep in mind about from a chatbot perspective. So Google went back to the drawing board and thought, okay, what's the best way that we can actually build a conversational action for the Google Assistant? So is there a better way to build conversational actions now? Yes. So that's where we come into the Actions Builder. So the Actions Builder is a new way, a new tool to build conversational actions for the Google Assistant. So what is Actions Builder, right? So Actions Builder gives you a powerful and easy web-based IDE, right, that's integrated into the Actions console. So as I mentioned before, we had Dialog Flow and Actions on Google. We used to go back and forth, but design the conversation in Dialog Flow and then move on to the Actions on Google console to test it. Now with all that complications, we've kind of simplified it into one simple tool, which is called the Actions Builder, which is basically a web-based IDE where it gives you everything that you need as a conversational designer or developer. You have everything that's required for you to build conversational actions for the Google Assistant. Okay. So with Actions Builder, let's actually understand the UI and how it is. And then from there, the best part about why I wanted to do this session today is I actually want to build a simple demo using the new tool so that you guys get to understand the nuances as well as all the features that's available for the Actions Builder. I'm also having a quick glance at all of your comments as well. So we will go through the comments at the end of the session as well. So keep it coming, and we'll have some time to address those as well. Okay, so the first thing in terms of the UI. So the first one is the top menu. As you can see, we have overview, develop, test, deploy, analytics. Everything that you need to know as a designer as well as a developer, you have everything over here in one platform, right? Now, you also have the left menu over here. So it lists all the components. So if you're used to building conversations on Dialog Flow, there are certain changes that you need to keep in mind over here. We'll get to that as well. But think about the left navigation menu as all the components that's required for you. Things like intents, scenes, fulfillments, everything is on the left side. Then the third one is the build area. So this is one of the most exciting thing that I wanted to share with you all is the new actions builder actually gives you a glimpse or a blueprint of how you design, how your conversational design is. So this is a pretty powerful tool because before, instead of just trying to write everything and sketch it in your mind and go back and forth, because conversational actions can become really difficult when you have too many conversations. But with this build area, as you can see, you can actually see a complete, like a blueprint or wireframe of how your conversation flow is. So that's a great place. Then the fourth one is, again, data visualization. And you also have the details area. So that's over here. Okay. So what this basically means is anything that you click on this area, build area, you get to see a details area where you basically go ahead and configure things. Okay. So that's basically the actions builder, a quick overview of it. And let's actually understand some of the new concepts. Okay. So we talk about scenes. So the scenes is basically a building block for your action that processes user input and typically generates the response to the user. So if you think about from a dialog flow standpoint, and again, these are for our live users who's actually joining us live, who used to build on dialog flow. Think about scenes in a different way, because in dialog flow, we used to have intents, right? So we used to have intents, and intents were kind of tied up to some responses, right? And here with scenes, a scene is a combination of a collection of components, and each scene contains your conversational flow, each conversational flow. So everything that you need to have for one specific conversational piece, you have it contained within a piece, within a scene. So think about an example would be the main invocation or the starting scene where you greet the user, right? So once the user is greeted, when you go on to the next flow, next conversation, that can be one scene. Okay, that can be a start scene, that can be any scene that how you define. So a scene is nothing but a building block for your action that processes users' input. So the user's input can be in the form of voice or text, and typically generates a response to the user. Custom intents often activate other scenes. So from one scene, you can transition to another scene and so on. So we'll be going through that during a live demo of that. And then we have intents. So with intents, it defines user input, and the action can understand what the intent of the conversation was. It's very similar to dialog flow, but again, let me explain this. Let's say when we looked at an example of the previous conversation where the person was talking about something to warm him up, I need a hot soup and I want it fast. So there, the intent of the user was to get a recipe based on his conversation. So that can be a recipe intent, right? So the same way, here the intent is basically whatever the conversation that you're having, you define intents over there, and you train what the intents are, right? So once you train the intents, give them training phrases. So when the user says something that matches or is similar to a training phrase, the corresponding intent is matched. So we have scenes, we have intents, And you would, at this point, you would actually see how is this actually different from Dialog Flow. Uh, Two things. I mean, there's multiple reasons why the Actions Builder is better for you if you're building for the Google Assistant. Is the NLU is better, so they made the NLU better. Um, it's faster since you don't have to transition between two different frameworks and platforms. Uh, right now, the performance is way better, so you get the responses as quickly as possible. Everything that you need as a developer is all built into one platform, right? And then with all of that, we had intents, and then we also have training phases, just like Dialog Flow. So examples, so training phases are nothing but when you are designing a conversation, unlike a mobile application where you would actually design screens and UI and click buttons and stuff like that. Here it's a conversation, so you need to actually train what the user might say to your action. So that's where training phases come into. So examples of what a user might say to match an intent. So the assistant, NLU, which is the natural language understanding engine, naturally expands these training phases to include other similar phrases. So you as developer, you have to train with few phrases, give it as much as possible, but don't overblow your training phases to a wide net, because you have to make sure that whatever the main intent is, you stick to those kind of training phases. Otherwise, let's say you have two intents and you have the similar training phases fed into two different intents, then you never know which the machine learning algorithm will choose. So then we have a concept called transitions. So transition defines scene to scene transition. So when you want to transition from one scene to another, that's how you actually use. So we'll get to see all of this over here. So we've kind of covered a lot of new concepts. Some of that you guys are already aware of. So I thought let's actually build and learn at the same time. So I always do this during my sessions. So I hope you guys find this next part of the session useful. And at the same time, if you think that you want to fully understand the Google Assistant Actions Builder for the Google Assistant, I do have a tutorial where I've done it with a Googler, Jessica Dean Earlycha. So she's a Google developer advocate for the Google Assistant. So we took time, we built a great tutorial, hands-on tutorial from end to end. So I highly recommend that you guys go and check that one out. She actually goes on to explain all the different features, why it's important, what are the advantages of using the Actions Builder. There's even migration tools for you to migrate your existing projects and so on. So there's a lot of things that's been covered in that specific tutorial. So I would highly recommend that. And if you're looking to actually get access to this slide with all the links, it will be shared in the live comments as well. So do check that out. So let's stop here and switch to Actions Console. So this is the actions on Google Console. So if you are doing this for the first time, make sure that you go to console.actions.google.com. And again, I'm saying the entire thing is so easy that probably after you've watched this video, you can actually go ahead and build this within like 10, 15 minutes. And you don't need to really have hardcore developer experience. As I mentioned, the main advantage of the Actions Builder is it's meant for two kinds of users, and in fact, three. Let me explain. So typically, while building a conversational action right now, what's happening right now is there's two kinds of people involved. One is called a conversational designer. A conversation designer is the one who's experienced in designing conversations. Sometimes as developers, we always have our mindset set into different rules, but conversations are not like that. You have to make sure that you follow certain conversation design guidelines. Google also provides you the option to and resources for that, so do check that out. But typically, how Google envisions this entire thing is we have conversation designers and we have developers, and they want a tool to actually work hand in hand for both of them. So from a conversation designer standpoint, they can design the conversation, and as developers, you have the Actions SDK, which will pull down this entire project in the form of a file-based application for you locally to have a local access to it. So where you can actually connect it with your backend, do a lot of coding, backend logic, and then deliver it back. So again, in terms of version control, that makes it even more easier, because before you used to have, with Dialog Flow, you used to have agents and you have to download the zip file, upload it, and all of that. Now with this approach with the Actions SDK, everything is seamless. You can do version control, which typically would allow you to work as a team. So that's the whole thought process that Google put in as well, is in the future, while building conversational actions, it's just not one person sitting and building. Of course, you can sit and build a conversational action right now. It's very easy. But for having a production ready, really cool, high class voice conversation action or application, you typically have conversation designers and you have conversation developers, where both work hand in hand and work as a team spread across different geographic areas. So that's the whole another intent of why the Actions Builder. So moving on to building one. So this is the Actions on Google Console. So you can go to console.actions.google.com. So this is one of the test accounts that I have. You can log in with your Google Gmail account. So let's go ahead and create a new project. So you can see the moment you go there, they are actually providing you a new message over here which says new Actions Builder and Actions SDK is announced. Watch the video. So the video will also give you simple tutorials on how to get started. So let's go ahead and click New Project. And let's create a project over here. So I'm going to just type in okay. So let's go ahead and create a project. And again, you'd see that a lot of things have changed. It's much more streamlined over here. So we have smart home, right? And we have game related, and we also have custom. So if you are looking to build custom actions or conversational actions, this is what we go and click. So let's go ahead and click on custom and hit next. And again, over here, you have different samples. So of course, we'll be starting with a blank project so that you understand all the nuances and details as much as possible. You have different sample projects that you can actually try it out, and then so that would actually give you more confidence in how this was designed and how I can reuse those components. So you also have a sample project demonstrating how to build a conversational action that uses Firebase Firestore database, conversational components, facts about Google, Hello World. So these are all different sample projects. Let's go ahead and start with the basic. We will learn a lot of these concepts within this blank project. So let's go ahead and click on blank project and hit start building. Okay, so once you are done with the initial project creation, you would basically come on to this screen, which is called the develop. Okay, so here we are going to develop our conversational action. And the first thing that you would notice is the display name. So display name is typically what you would provide your action name to be, right? So for example, let's say, hey G, talk to GDG Meena can be one of that, right? So I'm just going to give GDG Meena actions. Let me just put it this way. Again, this is not the right way of doing it, because you do need to make sure that you actually follow some guidelines and stuff. You don't use other brand names. Of course, you can't use like Google over here, and don't make sure that you follow the guidelines over there. And the other great thing about this tool is you also have these help sections across each of these components. So if I hit this help, you get to see everything that you need to understand about this specific component. So over here, you can see pick a display name that is short, unique, and memorable. Check the pronunciation of your display name. So sometimes you might actually give a name, but the pronunciation might not be accurate. So you can always check by clicking here and record your pronunciation and see if Google is able to understand that properly. So based on that, try and pick a name that it understands, so that it will be seamless across everyone's experience as well. Here you can choose your voice, different voice as well. So from female, male, and stuff like that. So this is the develop section. So let's go ahead and just save it. Okay. Now with that being done, what you do is, let me do this. Okay. This is not the one. Let me try and create a new one. So custom, hit next. We have blank project. Okay, so this is the screen that you need to do. So for some reason, I went back to the old project way of doing things, but this is what you should typically see when you are using the new actions builder project. So you can see that we are ready to go. So hopefully we have this working fine. In the meantime, let me have a glance at the comments. Okay, so here we are. So you see, right now we are directly into the develop section. So over here we have the display name. I'm just gonna give GDG Meena actions. Hit save. So that's the settings part, right? So we've done the settings. You can see that could not reserve your pronunciation GDG because your display name's pronunciation is already reserved by another action. So you immediately get to know that. So let's say actions build. See if someone has already used this. Okay, that's also taken. Okay, so now that we are done with our settings, so where we gave a display name as well as the Google Assistant voice. So the next thing is, you see on the left navigation, this is what I was talking about. Everything that you need is all there in the left navigation menu. And these are all the components that you need to build a conversational action. So the main thing is to go and click on main invocation. So this is the most exciting part, right? The ability for you to see what exactly happens from a conversational flow standpoint. So under the main invocation, this is typically when the user says, talk to GDG Meena Actions tutorial. Then whenever the user talks to the Google Assistant, in this specific invocation, it would then trigger your main invocation, so which is GDG Meena Actions tutorial, right? So this is the first thing that gets triggered after this conversation. So what happens is, you see this arrow, I can click on that, but when I click on this invoke action, it pretty much gives a configuration screen over here, or a detailed configuration screen. So when your action is invoked, you have uh, you can either call a webhook directly from here, or you can create a prompt. So a prompt is like a message that you pretty much give back to the user. So you can consider this more like a response back to the user, and we'll also understand some of the important things about prompts shortly. So here what I'm going to do, so this is pretty much what you would typically type in as, let's say, from a greeting standpoint. So this is the first thing that the user is interacting with your application, right? So you can actually give a greeting and see how this works. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy something. So I've given it a message over here. And one of the other things to note is also we have both YAML as well as JSON representation, right? So we have YAML and JSON both. So depending on what you are used to, you can actually use this. I've just pasted in YAML because it's much more clean and neat. So let me just go and save this. Okay. And at the bottom, you can also see we have some quick way to add some contents. We'll get to see that shortly. And we also have transition, and then we have end conversation. So right now what's happening is, when I talk to the user using GDG Mean Actions tutorial, or the action name, it will invoke this action where we are saying a welcome greeting over here, right? And what happens after that? It ends the conversation. So let's actually go ahead and try to test this out if it actually works. So go to the test. So this is one of the beauty of the new actions builder, because you have now the ability to quickly develop and test. You don't have to go back and forth across two different platforms. So with that being said, you can either talk to this using the mic or click on this, and let's see what happens.
The test version of GDG Mean Actions tutorial. Start building your action by defining main invocation.
So it has not yet reflected. So if you go back to the develop, click on main invocation. So it takes some time. We've noticed that it takes some time to get the whole thing working. But once the changes are being done, you'd be able to find it in the test. So let me actually not waste time. Let me actually go ahead and start building this out, and finally we will test it. Okay. So now we've done with uh, a simple greeting, right? So what I want to do next is, instead of ending the conversation, so you can even, you heard right how the conversation ended. Instead of ending the conversation, I can just click on here and transition to a new scene. So this is where we talk about scenes. So this main invocation, you can think about like the main starting point. From there, I want to actually go into a new scene. I can either add a scene from here, or I can go to the left navigation menu and add a scene there. So I'm just going to click from here, click start, and click add. So start is nothing but a new scene that I'm creating. So you can see immediately once I did that, I have a scene that's created, so which is called start. So when I click on that, you get to see a visual representation of that as well, right? So what transition from the main invocation? So this was the main invocation. So this scene is starting from there, and what happens next over here? So what I would do is, let me actually go to the on enter stage. So on enter of this scene, I want to actually paste another thing. Sometimes it can also be due to a let's save this. Okay, and let's do the same thing for the main invocation as well. Okay, perfect. So let's save that. So we did the main invocation. From the main invocation, we are transitioning to the start scene. In the start scene, we come here on the on enter of the start scene. We have defined a prompt, which is before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told, right? So this is a prompt. So typically, what happens with prompts is prompts basically work like a queue system. So whenever a prompt is added, it goes into the queue. So we have a prompt in our main invocation, it goes there, and when we transition into this scene, we have another prompt over here as well. So this would also go into that specific queue. So we have, when we test this application, you'd notice that we have both the queues together in one together within the same conversation. So we have that, and then you can quickly add suggestions. So based on this, you can put suggestions. Yes, I can just put as yes and no. So these are the two suggestions that you want, because we are asking a question here. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told? So we can have suggestions for the user, yes or no. And these yes and no match can be done using our intent. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to create an intent over here. And we do also have system intents. So a quick note over here, no match, no input and cancel. So no match is whenever a user talks and if there is no matching in the conversation, we don't have any intent that can understand what the user is saying, it would go into the no match system intent. You do have the option to go and change what the message is, but typically if I click on this, you would see that it will say, sorry, I didn't catch that, can you try again? But when you're building a conversation, make sure that you modify this to something that you redirect the user to back into what the conversation actually means. Okay, so no input is basically, let's say you're talking through a smart display or a speaker, but you're not giving the input within the specified time. So let's say within 8 seconds you don't respond back, it goes into as a no input. So it will ask you again. So you have like three chances to actually give out the answer. So with that being said, let's quickly create uh, an intent over here. So I'm just gonna do here, click new intent, and just gonna keep it as yes. And I'm also gonna create a new intent called no. Okay. So I'm going back to the start screen. And over here, you can see we have the prompt, we have the suggestions. I can quickly go into the custom intent uh, and add the yes or no. So I can choose yes over here. I can choose what the response should be. So I can just copy and paste this over there. save it, and we can also add another intent, select no to that, and send a prompt over here as well. Okay. And over here, I'm just gonna quickly just put it as another conversation response. So we have that, save this. So here you can see, if certain things are not there, you can actually get errors and warnings over here. So here you can see intents doesn't contain any training phrases. So of course we need to train our intent. So we created an intent called yes. We have to train it. So I'm just gonna give few things like yes. If you're typing this on the screen, you might actually get why I would. So some of the training phases, just gonna hit save. And the same thing goes with no as well. So I'm just gonna give no or nope. So these are my training phrases. So hit save. So we've kind of created intents. So going back to our start scene, when it comes to the start scene, it goes into the send prompts. We give the response here, and we'll say, do you want yes or no? When you hit yes, then it goes into the custom matching over here for yes, and then the same thing goes for no over here. Intent no does not have enough unique training phases. So you can see how cool the new tool is. It gives you all the I don't want. So it gives you like everything that's required for you to build conversational actions quickly. So all the errors and warnings are out. So let's actually go and see what happens. So once all of this is done, the transition over here, I'm just going to end the conversation for no. And for the time being, I'm also going to end the conversation for yes as well. Okay, so it does take some time to actually propagate all of these changes, but let me actually go on to the test module. Now that we are also running out of time, so we can slowly start looking at some of the information as well. Let me zoom this in. Okay, so let's test this out.
Of GDG Mina Actions tutorial. A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Gryffindor. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you are on your way to an epic journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
So as you can see, this was the message under the main invocation. We transition into the new scene, which had a prompt on enter, which was basically before you continue your quest, would you like to your fortune told? We added the suggestion chips over there. So if I say yes over here, this would hit our intent called yes.
Depends on the aid you choose to use for your quest. Choose wisely. Farewell, stranger.
So it's as simple as this. So the other great thing about the new tool is also you have the entire conversational flow over here. So these are the event logs. So you can see we started the conversation over here, and then on interaction match, what happened. Then on enter, we had this as the message, speech tag, text tag. Then we waited for the user. And after that, based on yes or no, when the user told yes, it actually matched the yes intent, you can see over here, and the response or the prompt for that. So that's basically a very short introduction about the new tool. There's a lot more that you can do, things like adding your webhook, all of that. So I do have all of that in the tutorials that I was mentioning. So let's go back into the presentation. So everything that you need to understand is available here. So let's actually quickly go through all the comments. So let's see. So we are talking about someone said that they had the same error. Try again with the new project. I'm sure it will work. Then we also have questions on. Do let me know your questions again if you can leave it down so that I don't have to scroll back. But Arabic is not yet. Why is Arabic not yet supported? The team is heavily working on to support Arabic as a language for developing. But if you're just talking about the Google Assistant is available in Arabic. So do try that out. Yes, all of these sessions are recorded as well, so you can actually go back and refer this video. Um, Yes, Arabic language. I do get a lot of these questions on Arabic language support. Yes, we have notified the team in Google. They are looking into it, so I can definitely let you guys know when it is ready. Any other questions apart from the Arabic? Is it also a combination between AI, AR, and VR? So I think one of these comments is it a combination between AI, AR, and VR? I think that's because the previous tutorial that I did was involving AR and VR. So I'm not just going to give out anything in regards to that, but this is purely based on conversational AI. So let me check in with the moderator as well if there's any other comments that I have not covered. So as I mentioned earlier, great to have you all today. I'm really excited to have you all on the live session today. So happy to see a lot of familiar, I cannot say faces because I don't see you guys, but I can see some familiar names who have come for the previous sessions as well. Do check this out. So she's Jessica from Google. She has actually done a tremendous job in going through this entire tool. It's a 1 hour video. Make sure to go through the list and try and understand the concepts over there. And if you like to reach out to me directly, try and connect with me through Twitter, right? And finally, make sure that you leave your feedback, which is very important for us. Leave your feedback, get your attendance certificate. And the most fun part about this is that I hope you guys try out the weekly challenges. It's a great way to actually get a lot of goodies as part of your gift box. So we have, if you complete 6 quests, you get a gift box. And if you complete 12 quests, you get a Google Home Mini. So that's a great way for you to actually get a Google Home Mini and actually use the Actions Builder to build your own conversational actions and directly try it out using the Google Home Mini. So that would be pretty cool. Do let me know in Twitter, connect with me, and show me what exactly that you guys have built using the new tool. And I'll be more than happy to see what you guys are building using the new tool. So I hope you guys enjoyed this session and see you all in the next one. Thank you so much. And all the references are also mentioned on the comments. So I hope you guys check out the slides with all the links and also the YouTube channels. Thank you so much.